Hello, beautiful family. I was going to bring this as a live video to you, but our internet connection, as usual, does not allow me to do it, and it dropped out halfway. So here I am, and I just wanted to jump on to talk a little bit about something that has become very predominant and frequent in my private practice with clients in the last few months through my own experience, and I feel like all this is amplified with the awakening that's happening around the world right now. And so that is, I want to talk about chronic pain, spontaneous pain, our pain body, random body joint nerve pains going on, random, or even sudden disease conditions and so forth. And that seems to really increase in our society these days. Literally every client, very close to every client, let's say 90% of people who've been coming through my door into my Ayurvedic practice are experiencing things like fibromyalgia, unexplained nerve pain, like numbness and tingling of one side of the face or the body, or with very sudden onsets as well. And they are people who do live healthily, who don't have major histories of disease and things in their families and so forth, and yet we are experiencing it. Same with, for example, I've been having chronic back pain for years and years now, and still trying to shift it. It certainly got better. But yeah, and so what I want to share in this is kind of my personal perspective that I gathered through my clinical practice and working with people, especially over the last few months, and seeing the development with that, as well as, again, my personal experience. So as always, take what resonates, leave the rest. I like to say when talking about this stuff, as well as most of the disease and chronic disease symptoms that we experience as human beings, is that they are fabricated. And what I mean by that is that they are self-created, self-inflicted, not necessarily and definitely not consciously by the individual, but by how we live as human beings these days. Obviously the environmental factors come in, and as in the foods we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink, that is more toxic than anything else in it, right? So that's our coming into that, but and we know that. But apart from that, it's more so our socio-psychological development as human society, compared to other living beings that we see around us in nature, like in the animal and plant kingdoms, right? And so the statement I want to make is that I believe most of chronic or sudden onset unexplained disease, in particular unexplained or spontaneous pains, nerve pains, and things like fibromyalgia, are due to unreleased trauma and suppressed emotions. And maybe that's not new to you at all anyway. As a side note about fibromyalgia, again, my perspective as a shamanic and holistic health and natural medicine practitioner is that it's very much used as a blanket term. Like allopathic or Western medicine is incredibly helpful for diagnosis and testing, right? That's what they have incredible technologies for, to be very exact, for emergency procedures like surgery and so forth, and to deal with already progressed and advanced conditions. But allopathic medicine is not very great in recognizing root causes beneath symptoms. It's more of a band-aid approach. It's an emergency approach. It's not a preventative approach. And when it comes to fibromyalgia, I feel like you could really watch it become so much more common and so much more frequent over the last not even handful of years. And out of the sudden, it's just like anxiety that has kind of catapulted. It's become a very, very frequently diagnosed term. And fibromyalgia is very much, amongst other things, a blanket term for unexplained all over body and or nerve pains that don't seem to have an exact root cause, or rather whose root cause is not detectable with allopathic medicine and testing. For example, my back pain that I've had for 6 or 7 years now, it's spreading, it's morphing, it's changing over the years, and it's still there. It went from like a knife sharp pain to a very metallic sheet across my entire back instead of having a mobile spine type pain. And I got all sorts of testing done on it. I've had ultrasounds, I had several x-rays for years now. I've had MRI scans done and so forth, and no one can see anything. There's not anything structurally wrong with my body. There's a little bit of bursitis and inflammation here and there, but nothing that lets you pinpoint, right, that's the cause of the pain. And so you actually find that's the case for very, very, very many chronic and nerve pain patients. And so then they will get diagnosed with terms like fibromyalgia alongside other things. And you know, it is helpful in a sense because it allows you to narrow down things in a certain way, but also I just want you to remember it's a blanket term for something that's not yet scientifically explainable or pinpointable. And the reason for that is that our pain body, it's beyond our physical body. And you find that, you know, if we don't hear our body scream, our being, our soul scream at us in our auric, our energetic field, and then in our mental and emotional field, then the issue, the dissonance will progress further into our physical field, and it will actually manifest as physical pain in our body. But also, that entire process is an accumulation process. And what's accumulating is unresolved trauma and suppressed emotions, which are aka unresolved trauma, which is essentially our body having been in fight and flight mode from a certain event. And that can be, you know, some of us have experienced very severe spontaneous super high impact trauma, like, you know, an accident or abuse and torture and things like that, like a one-off deeply traumatic event that will kick it off for you, obviously. But there's also something that's commonly called relational trauma, or I forgot the other term for it, but that can be, you know, the trauma starts on such a small, like such a subtle scale before we become aware of, oh wow, I got traumatized. Like we get traumatized as an infant in the crib when we are you know, laying in a room by ourselves, getting cold, and we're screaming to get to the next level of comfort, which in this case would be getting warmth, but we can't help ourselves and there's no one there to soothe us or to help us. So no one has consciously inflicted trauma on us, no one has acted towards us with malice, and we haven't gotten ourselves into the shits either. It just simply was, right? And still that can have been enough trauma for someone to then recover as a almost 40-year-old, for example, and realize, whoa, I've got this pattern of helplessness or low self-worth, and it actually traces back to this incident when we were this infant laying in the crib, right? So that is trauma, and that can have an incredible impact, long-lasting impact on your life, on your being, and how you're able to interact with yourself, access your own potential, and interact with the world and call in what you're here to call in, like up there and not down here. And so in the same way, chronic pain is manifested. And I had this vision or kind of realization the other day of how what leads to chronic pain is the accumulation of little traumas, of every time we swallow something down and don't allow ourselves to feel, whoa, actually what this person said or just did was really hurtful. It's got nothing to do with blaming them or blaming or putting, you know, pointing fingers out there. It's got to do with acknowledging and validating how an experience has made us feel. Validating our own sadness, our own pain, our own shock, our own fear. All of those things, they're still valid without having to point fingers at anyone. And every time we don't validate that, it's kind of like, you know, how animals in the wild, they shake things off when they experience a traumatic or a high stress, high alert situation, and then they will move on like nothing has happened because they've released the impact, the trauma, they could move on. Whereas we don't do that. We have unlearned our natural coping mechanisms as human beings. We don't shake or we don't have an equivalent to shake things off, to aka move energy through, so that energy accumulates. And that's how, you know, all those suppressed emotions, every time we didn't validate our own emotions by allowing ourselves to just feel them without judgment, without having to fix, just feel them, every time we instead press them down, it's kind of like you're stuffing them into they need to go somewhere, and it's your body that ends up holding it. And so you kind of, you know, we only have so much space in this body, right? And we start to stuff up, like really full, feel like filling up a closet so full you can hardly close the doors. That's what's happening when you keep suppressing emotions on top of emotions on top of emotions, and you stuff it into, you know, into the little nook and crannies, and then they fill up, and like we really start to feel our being, our body up on a cellular level, until there's so much tension, so much stuff stored in our cells, that will create so much in our tension that makes so much tension in our body that makes us immobile. So it will, on the more kind of physical level, it will actually be our fascia that's holding it or that's impacted. If there's so much tension because our cells literally are so chock-a-block of full, it's like overeating, and your stomach is, you get this kind of chicken chest stomach, right? And you're so full and there's so much tension here, you feel like you can hardly move. It's the same sense, the same thing as this overeating happening on a cellular level in our body. So in reaction to that, we are immobile, we can't move as much anymore, and we literally grow stagnant, right? And once you overcome this threshold, we've blocked the flow of prana, of life force, of movement, of the natural energetic flow. Remember, emotions are energy in motion, and if we take the motion away from that energy, just sitting there being stagnant, and that will overcome a certain threshold at a certain time, and then create inflammation in our body, which will come up in pain, in nerve pain, and swelling, and pain conditions in general, right? And that will, too much of that, it has nowhere to go. The relief valve can't release, because there's so much tension, it can't even freaking open. And so that would then result in chronic pain, in nerve pain, in what's classified as fibromyalgia, amongst other things. The reason you can't find a root cause for it through scanning, or you can't get a proper medical diagnosis for what it is that you're experiencing in your body, in your being, is because there is no physical root cause. It's simply that it's system overload. It's nervous system overload, and then cellular overload. Your bioorganism is so chock-a-block laden with energy that has nowhere else to go. It will create friction because there's so much tension, and this friction will create excess heat and then excess inflammation and shooting nerve pains or whatever it is. I always like to, with my clients, I use this analogy of our nervous system being like this old hanging telephone lines that you see in the forest, right? And they have this thick rubber insulation around them, and once the rubber insulation wears off and it's getting frizzy here and there, you see it sparking, and the lines, the actual electricity lines, are hanging loose. And so if a bird was not to land on there, they would literally get fried. If they hit the ground, they would electrocute, right? And the same with our nervous system. It's like the rubber, the nourishing sheathing around the nervous system is growing frail through too much tension, too much energy load accumulation in our body, and that will send off our nervous system dysfunction. It will leave us with random nerve pains, body pains, inflammation, and so forth, when that remains untreated. And that also has a different expression in different people depending on who we are, what our history is genetically or epigenetically, as well as, and that is informed by our experiences, by our beliefs, by our traumas, by how have we managed and felt and processed our emotions and experiences and so forth, where we're living, what are environmental factors that are coming in. all this plays a role in how that accumulation is going to manifest in our body, in our being. And so you might find for some people it is fibromyalgia / nerve pains. For others it's, you know, symptoms of that is also fatigue, feeling incredibly drained, weak, vulnerable, lethargic, foggy, all that. You know, how can all that be of fibromyalgia? You can, you know, they are all symptoms of, I hope you can see that, of just the freaking system overload. It's like, oh, too much charge going on here. Nah, we're shutting down. That's essentially what it is, shutting down symptoms of your nervous system, of your body, of your bioorganism, as a result of stagnant energy that started in our energetic field. Now it needs to go somewhere, so it's accumulating in this vessel, and there's only so much space in this vessel until it bursts, or some other symptoms are to come from that. So that has become a really, really huge factor in my work. And almost every client I see, we do bring it back to the nervous system and what we work on, and it's such a common theme. And also this mass awakening that's going on right now, you know, it's a common thread in our human society that we've just come to this pinnacle of how far we can take it. You see it in our environment. Mother Nature is rearing her head up now, finally, that we are raiding the forests and her grounds and the soil, and pollute the planet and pollute the water and pollute the environment in any way. We are going too far. Currently we see it rearing up through bushfires, through fucking wildfires there are across the planet, through flooding, the poles melting, you name it. It's, you know, we're coming to this pinnacle of holy crap, like it's now or never. We got to change 180 degrees, or we're going down the other side. Environmentally we see it in our bodies, in our beings, and on a societal level. Look at the suicide rates, look at the mental health decay, look at the overall health decay, look at the level of freaking chronic disease. Have you ever seen an animal in the wild untouched by humans and by human impact, which mind you is very hard to find these days because our toxins are leaching everywhere into the waterways and so forth. But any being that's not impacted by that, by this fabrication, you don't find cancer, heart disease, liver cirrhosis, all this shit at the rate we experience it now in as humans and in human society, because we have created it through the way we live and what we do to ourselves and to the environment and so forth. And it's all, you can see it's all a cycle, and it's all coming surfacing now. And it is really our nervous system being at the point of, holy fuck, I've hung in here for so long, there's only so much more I can take before poof, and we all explode with all those crazy symptoms, be that mental health stuff, pain levels these days are going through the roof. So guys, this is a reminder, we all know where the root cause is, and it means for us to face the mark, to face what's in the shadows, to befriend the shadows by feeling them, by embracing all of us, by finally allowing ourselves to feel the emotions, to feel what happened 10, 20, 15 years ago, yesterday as a child, to come to a place of being willing to understand how we have felt at the time, with compassion, with love, how our parents have felt when they raised us, and their parents and their parents and their parents, and coming back into the heart space to resolve this trauma that's underlying any symptoms and thereby blockages and restrictions we are experiencing right now. We are creating our own limit, we are creating our own glass ceilings, and we know exactly how to push through that. So I encourage you to have the courage to go deep within yourself, to unravel and unwind anything that's still stuck in you, in your vessel, on the cellular level. Give that energy back into motion and to its natural flow. If you need help with that, I'm always here for you to reach out. Can work with you via Zoom, in person if you're in the down south area. Yay. Lots of love, and do reach out. The real strength, the real courage is to go and seek help when you need it and take responsibility for yourself that way by reaching out.